Guys, what's up? It's me, Thomas. Tonight we're back here with Wrestling with Regret, and tonight we're taking a look back at Wargames. Yeah, we're taking a look back at this, match quality history. So this is gonna be interesting, considering like Wargames and all that. So basically, think of it like a giant Hell in a Cell with two teams of four. I think. Like I said, I'm just gonna let the video explain it. So let's take a look back at the history of Wargames. So be sure to like Scott for more. Hope you enjoy. Let's go.
Is there a match type in wrestling more well known, more enduringly popular than the steel cage?
Joseph Connors, Joe Henry, Drew Galloway inside a steel cage.
Solid steel cage.
I want Brody and I want him in a cage.
The first recorded instance of a cage match in wrestling took place in Atlanta, Georgia on June 25th, 1937.
Georgia Championship.
And ever since then, we've seen tons of different variants on the genre. Once in a while, someone tries to think beyond the standard four walls of steel and get really creative, in the hopes that theirs becomes one of the all-time great ideas in wrestling. Some of those wild new concepts on the steel structure have worked, while some have failed. But no matter the size or the shape of the cage, no matter the decade, the desire to watch guys beat the hell out of each other like animals is damn near universal. Of all the different structures out there, there's only one that really matters. The one that's inspired every cage-based match since its inception. Of course, I'm talking about the Shark Cage match with Chief Jay Strongbow and Don Kent.
Want to try that again?
Very small, as you can see, barely holding the two men.
Kidding.
Yeah,
this is what I really meant.
Blood and guts.
Ooh, close.
One more time?
Really close, Regal, though I was thinking of something else you said.
With the W?
Wargames.
There you go.
There it is. This Saturday night at Survivor Series, the Wargames match makes its long-awaited main roster debut in WWE. Make no mistake, this is a
with
huge
Roman
deal.
Reigns and the Bloodline taking on their rivals.
WWE was always hesitant to utilize WCW ideas, and when it comes to match types, there's none other from that company with a greater legacy than that of Wargames. Many people see this as the ultimate validation of the match's creator, a massive seal of approval for perhaps his greatest contribution to the world of sports entertainment from the biggest name in that world. The fact that Wargames is coming to Survivor Series is a brilliant piece of business for a few reasons. For one, the show historically has been the place where newness is the name of the game. Think of all the stars who made their debut at this event over the years. The Undertaker, The Rock, Kurt Angle, Jon Moxley, Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, current and future legends all. The Elimination Chamber made its debut at Survivor Series 2002, a match that was actually the result of a compromise between Vince McMahon and Triple H, the man who's been spearheading the Wargames campaign for longer than some of today's fans have been alive. Just the Survivor Series match concept alone was considered highly experimental in 1987, though even that was lightly inspired by the multi-man aspect of Wargames. Oh yeah, and the entire pay-per-view exists because they wanted to run against Starrcade the same day. As I talked about in my review of the inaugural Survivor Series, that show crushed Starrcade 87 in pay-per-view buys, mostly because of the power WWE wielded over the cable companies. So for a...
I think if I remember correctly with the classic pay-per-view review, basically Vince pretty much said, hey, if you're running Starrcade, don't expect us to give you WrestleMania 2. Or I think it was 2. I can't remember. It was either 1, 2, 3. Like I said, it was either WrestleMania's 1, 2, or 3. I don't know. Yeah, so basically, they capitulated and be like, fine, we won't run Super Brawl. Okay? Yeesh. But let's be real, that was pretty much a huge bluff on Vince, because, let's be real, they could have just easily said, you know what, we won't need it, we'll just run it. Or at least I think it was a bluff on Vince's part, right? I don't know. Which, let's be real, if it didn't work, I don't think WWE would be around today, you know? Like, considering, I don't think anyone wants to work with someone that's willingly threatening, TV execs. Dude, really? Anyway, back to Wargames.
Product of Jim Crockett Promotions to get the red carpet treatment at one of WWE's most significant shows of the year, it's undoubtedly a full circle moment. But WWE is hardly the only company who's tried to capture the magic of the match beyond. Ever since WCW went under, everyone from Ring of Honor to MLW to AEW have all done their take on Wargames. Its influence has stood the test of time as it's finally made its way back onto a major show. As we prepare for its epic return this weekend, let's take a brief look at the history of Wargames and try try and figure out why its spirit has persisted all these years. In 1986, Jim Crockett Promotions was in the midst of its hottest year, both financially and creatively. But things took an unfortunate turn that October when the heir apparent to Dusty Rhodes' spot as a top babyface in Magnum TA suffered a career-ending car accident. Between that, a poorly planned purchase of Bill Watts' UWF, and some bad accounting, JCP suddenly found itself in dire straits and needed to hit a few creative dingers to stay above water. Luckily for them, they had Dusty Rhodes as their booker. You can never claim that the American dream was ever not creative enough. Over the decades, the man came up with more event and match concepts than you could shake a cowbell at. In an effort to generate excitement for the 1987 Great American Bash Tour, Dusty needed something huge, and what was bigger and more American than war itself? Inspired by the film Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, Dusty created the War Games match by smushing together two other match types, the cage match and the two-ring battle royal. It's been said that 1983's last battle of Atlanta,
WCW would do a three-ring one.
Buzz Sawyer and Tommy Rich was the inspiration for Hell in a Cell, but it could also be argued that it played a role in War Games First, which, coincidentally enough, also debuted in the City of Trees. It was at the Omni in Atlanta on the 4th of July 1987. The Four Horsemen and J.J. Dillon fought in a losing effort to Dusty Rhodes, the newly turned Nikita Koloff, the Road Warriors, and their manager Paul Ellering. The match was a total bloodbath that resulted in some real-life injuries to some of the competitors, but thanks to its relatively simple rules and guaranteed violence, it was a critical and financial success that helped elevate the entire Bash Tour. War Games helped.
You know, funny thing. There's this, and Dusty took place in the first War Games match. Then we had his son Dustin, who completed in one of the greatest War Games matches in '92. But Cody Rhodes, like the other brother, aka the other son of Dusty, has yet to compete in War Games. Like, think about it. It's kind of crazy. Like, you think if they ever bring back, like, War Games, in the next Survivor Series, you think Cody will have, like complete the Rhodes trifecta? Like, think about it. Like, he's the only brother of the Rhodes, like, member of the Rhodes family who has yet to step into that War Games cell. You know? I mean, like I said, has anyone else noticed that, or is that just me? I mean, Cody's back, so good, but hopefully he stays healthy enough to, hopefully when War Games comes back up, they finally put him in. Which, come on, I think we all want to see that happen. Anyway.
Wrap up the tour in Miami at the end of the month, then was brought out again on house shows in Chicago and Long Island, New York. That last one was the first to not utilize all the horsemen, but in each of those first 4 War Games matches in '87, the babyface team won in the end. With the massive success of War Games, JCP had a signature match for the ages. The match initially served as a showcase for the devious Four Horsemen, but their losses to those Dusty Rhodes-led teams is what helped establish War Games as the ultimate be-all, end-all match type. Then Starrcade '87 happened, drawing only a fraction of the number of buys that WWF earned with Survivor Series that same night. Any goodwill and positive cash flow that Crockett Promotions had gained that summer was quickly dashed by the financial failure of their biggest show of the year. 1988 was a year of desperate Hail Mary attempts by the Dream in order to reverse the company's dwindling fortunes. While the War Games match was used sparingly in '87, the same could not be said the following year. That summer tour of house shows saw a whopping 11 War Games in the span of about a month and a half, and though none were ever televised or commercially released at the time, its flagrant overuse helped wear out the concept in the eyes of many fans. But that paled in comparison to what happened at the 1988 Great American Bash. The first ever televised version of War Games was barely War Games at all. Instead, it was given some new whack-ass twist with the Tower of Doom, a 3-tiered cage match in a single ring that involved trapdoors, lots of awkward brawling, and an escape rule to win. The fans in Baltimore were surprisingly into it, but the match beyond, it was not. Jim Ross, how would you describe this?
A cluster fuck.
JCP was purchased by Ted Turner a few months later to become World Championship Wrestling, and Dusty was sent out as Booker after he defied the corporate rules about bloodletting. But in 1989, new Booker Ric Flair continued to utilize War Games, first at that year's Bash pay-per-view and again at a house show in Atlanta. Much in the same vein as in '88, the match was more of a mid-card display than something befitting the main event. Thus, it was time to give War Games a break as the match went dormant throughout all of 1990. But by '91, Flair was out and Dusty Rhodes was back in as the head man in charge. And
here comes War Games again.
War Games at that year's Wrestle War. The match came back with a vengeance, not only main eventing a pay-per-view for the first time in its history, but also going down as the first one where the heel team won. This one, which saw the Horsemen defeat Sting, the Steiners, and Flying Brian Pillman, earned the coveted 5-star rating from Dave Meltzer, despite that horrific-looking moment when Sid crushed Pillman on both ends with a powerbomb into the cage roof.
God.
You may mock Sid for that, but hey, the man main evented every WrestleMania he ever appeared on. After another string of house show appearances to close out the summer of '91, Wargames spent the next 6 years exclusively on pay-per-view, finally cementing its status as a top-tier spectacle. First, there was the classic bout at WrestleWar 92, where Sting's squadron bested the Dangerous Alliance in another 5-star bloodbath that saw the beginning of the end of Paulie's supergroup. By '93, Eric Bischoff replaced Cowboy Bill Watts as WCW's EVP and began making sweeping changes for the overall betterment of the company. One such move was making the Wargames match a cornerstone of the annual Fall Brawl pay-per-view. However,
Shockmaster, whoops.
It's easy to forget in the midst of all the hilarity, but yes, the Shockmaster's awesomely bad debut was meant to hype his appearance as the partner of Sting, Davey Boy Smith, and Dustin Rhodes to face Sid, Vader, and Harlem Heat in the match beyond.
It should have worked! It should have worked!
And if you thought that no match could live up to such an auspicious debut, you'd be right, as the 93 edition is considered to be one of the most forgettable in Wargames history. Rather than accept defeat and embrace fate with the Shockmaster's terrible first impression, they doubled down on him as a somewhat clumsy monster, with Uncle Fred entering last and immediately winning the match with the bear hug, as if the whole gimmick wasn't quite 83 enough for everyone already. Things improved slightly with the 94 iteration when Dusty, Dustin, and the Nasty Boys beat the Stud Stable, but then things really took a dive in 95 at the height of Hulkamania's insufferable grip on WCW, when Hulk Hogan, Sting, Randy Savage, and Lex Luger beat the hapless Dungeon of Doom. Once considered to be a feud ender, the match ended up being the appetizer to the main course of Hulk Hogan and the Giant at Halloween Havoc 95. And what a meal it was.
Yeah, again, less about that, the better.
Wargames spent the next several years as a catalyst for major points in the NWO angle, with wins in both 96 and 97 against Team WCW. The 96 edition was known for the debut of NWO Sting, which eventually prompted the real Sting to show up, prove he could beat all those assholes at once, then zip back up to the rafters for another year. 1997 saw Kurt Hennig shockingly betray Ric Flair and the Horsemen because, hey, why settle for 12 members in a group when you could be lucky number 13? But the 1998 edition was perhaps the greatest departure from the original formula since the '88 Great American Bash. Not only did this match have 3 teams of 3 as opposed to 2 teams of 4 or 5, but for the first time ever, pinfalls were allowed. Ultimately, it took the New World Order to fragment into 2 groups, Hollywood and Wolfpack, for WCW to finally get a win at the big event. But that year's true legacy was WCW's half-hearted attempt to showcase the Ultimate Warrior and his Undertaker-like powers. This included the use of a trap door in the ring, a fun feature that many of the wrestlers apparently didn't know about beforehand, which resulted in Davey Boy Smith suffering a severe back injury that hampered his career and some would say shortened his lifespan. Wargames!
Thanks a lot, Hulk.
After that mess, Wargames needed a rest, and the match went dark for another 2 years before Vince Russo would bring it out of the mothballs. Hang on a second.
Are you sure?
Oh, damn it, Vince, you opened the wrong box. This one says 88, not 98. The September 4th, 2000 edition of Monday Nitro saw the spectacle known as Wargames 2000 Russo's Revenge. Aside from having an excessive 2 subtitles to its name, this match only added fuel to the conspiracy that Russo was actually a double agent sent by Vince McMahon to hasten WCW's downfall. Part Wargames, part Tower of Doom, and part Capture the Flag. The match saw outside brawling, handcuffs, Vince Russo as an active competitor, additional run-ins, and swerves atop of swerves, ending with Kevin Nash retaining his world title. Oh yeah, did I mention that this was a title match that anybody could have won, even people on Nash's own team? WCW finally went under just 6 months later in March of 2001, and with it, the Wargames match. The 2000 edition was a sad end to a match steeped in history, one that bridged the gap between generations of wrestlers, though one that had lost some of its emotional oomph in its final years. WWE owned the rights to the name upon purchasing WCW, and despite fans demanding its return forever, it was kept under lock and key for a very long time. That being said,
well, I mean, to be fair, I guess they saw Russo's version in 2000. They thought, yeah, we're gonna wait until that memory's gone before we bring it back. Which, I mean, fair to Vince, but I don't know, man. Probably not the best idea, but hey, if it works, it works, right? Anyway.
WWE did not own the concept of people fighting in 1 to 2 rings surrounded by a cage with each person coming in at timed increments.
So
that shit's in the public domain. Though variations on the War Games match were seen in the 1990s in places like Smoky Mountain Wrestling, ECW, and in Memphis, the death of WCW saw even more companies scramble to stake their claim to the match. XPW held their own version called Genocide in 2002. Impact Wrestling had Wednesday Bloody Wednesday in 2003. Ring of Honor held several steel cage warfare matches between 2005 and 2013. MLW did it in 2003 and again in 2018. Pro Wrestling Eve and Women's Superstars Uncensored were the first to have ladies fight in the War Games style. And of course, All Elite Wrestling continued its quest to become the spiritual successor to WCW by introducing Blood and Guts in 2021. They say imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, and judging by all the attempts made to recreate War Games over the years, it's obvious that the impact that it made on wrestlers and fans alike was a massive one. Even though WWE didn't want to give it away themselves, the demand was clearly there, which speaks volumes
Triple H
to
with the Elimination Chamber.
As I mentioned earlier, the match was rumored to return as early as the 2002 Survivor Series, but eventually became the Elimination Chamber, which borrowed a lot of the same elements. War Games was practically a dirty word in WWE for years, until in 2013, when the company released a DVD anthology of the match type hosted by Dusty Rhodes himself. Over the last 20 years, WWE's home video releases did wonders to revitalize dead brands and keep the spirit of others alive.
Makes sense.
Look no further than ECW, WCW, Saturday Night's Main Event, Hulk Hogan, and Ric Flair. Whether or not the War Games DVD was meant to be a litmus test for a revival is unclear, but fans finally got the answer to their prayers in 2017 when the match finally came back for NXT. It made sense considering not only was the Black and Yellow brand Triple H's pet project at the time, but also there was a lower risk because NXT was the developmental brand, unless it was competing against Raw or SmackDown and nothing else. Even though it was one level below the main roster, the fact that War Games had come back at all in WWE was nothing short of a minor miracle. Much like how the original War Games was meant to showcase the Horsemen, this new version
the Undisputed Era of Adam Cole, Roderick Strong, Kyle O'Reilly, and Bobby Fish.
And in 2019, the women got in on the action. Although some things have changed from the original formula, like the removal of the cage roof to accommodate big high spots, there's no denying that the success of War Games on NXT played a gigantic role in its promotion to the main roster at this year's Survivor Series. So why has the match beyond stayed in the hearts and minds of fans for so long?
Probably the Blood and
Guts.
Guts.
Like I said earlier, fans love a good cage match, but there's more to it than that. Way back in '87, Dusty Rhodes added just enough of a twist and just enough spice to the standard classic to create a whole new universe of action, unlimited combinations and potential outcomes, non-stop drama and suspense. And no matter what happens this Saturday when it gets the grand treatment on pay-per-view, it's hard to imagine that it won't be met with wild enthusiasm and nostalgia when that cage begins to lower. This Saturday is the culmination of a long and winding road that began in the birthplace of the steel cage match, with lots of trial and error along the way, to become the ultimate multi-person confrontation in pro wrestling. And like many of you, I can't wait for it. Thanks so much.
True that. When I saw War Games on NXT, that was a blast. Like the spots, the brutality of it all. Holy crap. You gotta love it. You gotta love it. Anyway, so there you go. The match beyond at War Games. So, what do you guys think? Let me know what you guys think about War Games in general. And until next time, like, subscribe for more. See ya.